This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
DRC declares a state of siege in the latest effort to end bloodshed in the eastern provinces of Ituri and North Kivu. Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi addresses parliament as he seeks to calm nerves over delayed election. And Uganda bans travelers from India as the Asian country reports a record number of new infections. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. This is the program that brings you African and global news from all perspectives. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour, in business, Zimbabwe launches a land bank to finance resettled farmers. And in sports, we profile South Africa's leading female boxing promoter, Joyce Kungwane, who's breaking barriers in the sport. Welcome to the program. We start in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where President Felix Tshisekedi has declared a state of siege in the eastern provinces of Ituri and North Kivu. Intercommunal violence and a surge in attacks by armed militias has killed over 300 so far this year and displaced more than 1.5 million Congolese. Government troops and UN peacekeepers have been struggling to stabilize the mineral-rich territory. The Allied Democratic Forces is believed to be responsible for much of the recent bloodshed. It has committed a spate of brutal reprisal attacks on civilians since the army began its offensive operation against the group in 2019. Well, CGTN's Chris Ochamringa joins us now with more from Kinshasa. Thank you for joining us, Chris. Just tell us more about this latest development and also what happens next.
Well, Maria, the president's spokesperson made the announcement about the state of siege late on Friday night, and this will basically apply in two areas, North Kivu province and Ituri province, where the conflicts have been raging over the past 2 years. They did not specify what exactly would happen, but what we know is that they're going to impose travel restrictions in and out of North Kivu and Ituri province because more than 300 people, like you mentioned, have been killed since the beginning of this year. And the president has been under a lot of pressure from the Congolese citizens, members of parliament, and non-governmental organizations to ensure that he ends this violence in the area. There have been horrific pictures of people whose heads have been slit, women whose stomachs have been cut open, being circulated on social media. And the Congolese people are saying enough is enough, something has to be done. That is why the president has come up with this state of siege to ensure that normal operations in those two areas are halted, suspended for a while until peace is restored in the areas. Mahia?
And Chris, past efforts to stop attacks in both Ituri and North Kivu have not borne fruit. Will the state of siege change this?
Well, it's still early days, to come up with such a conclusion. But what we know is that the DRC government launched a large-scale military operation in 2019, soon after President Tshisekedi took power. One of his priorities was to end the conflict there. But after that operation, we saw an increase in the killings of civilians, in particularly Beni territory in North Kivu. There's this notorious group known as the Allied Democratic Forces, which is originally from Uganda, that has been operating there. They have been killing civilians. It's still not clear why they're killing civilians. People are saying it's reprisal attacks because of the government offensive against them. But, there's a lot that is happening in the DRC. On the side of Ituri province, an area that is rich in gold. There is a militia known as the Cooperative for the Development of Congo, CODECO, that is composed of fighters who are farmers from a community known as the Lendu, who have had a long history of rivalry with another community of cattle keepers known as the Hema. These two people have been fighting over the control of land in that area. And so there has been a lot of bloodshed in the DRC. Analysts I've spoken to say there are also foreign actors who have an interest in, in that area being unstable because, it's rich in minerals, and that is how they profit from gaining from it. And so the president, has been very concerned about this continued attacks on civilians. Recently, when the president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, visited the DRC, they signed a military pact to bring in Kenyan troops to help the DRC government deal with these forces, because we know for a fact that the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO, wrote a report last year implicating some Congolese soldiers in the insecurity in the east. And so there's some mistrust of some of the senior army commanders in the DRC, and that's why the president has decided to bring in Kenyan troops to help him. The UN peacekeeping mission has been there for very long, but people have been protesting against them. They want them to go because they're saying they haven't been protecting them. So it's a very complicated situation, but we're still waiting to see how this state of siege will help in ending this conflict. Mahia.
All right, Chris, thank you for keeping us updated. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa speaking to us from Kinshasa in the DRC. Meanwhile, in Chad, the ruling military council says government soldiers have successfully repelled a rebel incursion towards the northern town of Noku. Noku is reportedly where former President Idris Deby was fatally wounded earlier in April. The military council says 6 of its soldiers were killed during the battle, which started on Thursday. And hundreds of rebels lost their lives while 60 others were captured. The council says the search for fugitives is still continuing. Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo is expected to address Parliament on Saturday. Farmajo's address comes in a bid to restore the September 2020 deal on a proposed electoral framework. According to the 2020 agreement, clan elders are to select delegates to electoral colleges, which in turn choose federal lawmakers who then pick a president. Earlier this week, President Farmajo backed down from his position on the extension of his presidential term and called for a new election. His term expired in February, but wrangling over elections meant a new crop of legislators was not selected to choose a new president. Meanwhile, the African Union is expected to send a special envoy to Mogadishu to oversee the efforts to resolve the stalemate. Well, for more on this, let's now cross to Mohamed Kahir Mohamud, a Somali journalist in Mogadishu. Mohamed, thank you for joining us. What can you tell us is the latest there?
Well, as we speak now, the lower house of parliament is in an extraordinary session to discuss reversing this decision of a 2-year term extension. And the president of the Federal Republic of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, is expected to join them and address the parliament on the significance of reversing this decision of term extension. And then the parliamentarians of the lower house of parliamentary members will vote by showing hands on this decision. And then, as we expect, the parliament is expected to reverse this decision unanimously, and then the president will go and then announce that there will be indirect elections. Then there will be a meeting between the regional leaders and the federal government or to chart way forward on the indirect elections based on 2020 September 17 electoral agreement.
All right, Mohamed, thank you very much for your insights. Mohamed Kahir Mohamud, who is a journalist, joining us live there from Mogadishu. Well, let's go deeper into this story. There has been tension in Mogadishu after rival factions of the security forces clashed over the controversial extension of President Farmajo's mandate. CGTN's Robert Nagila takes us through how we got here.
The latest political crisis in Somalia can be traced back to December, when the selection of lawmakers by clan elders was postponed. The opposition accused President Mohamed Farmajo of attempting to extend his term in office. The lawmakers were due to choose a president in February. On April 12th, the lower house of parliament passed a vote extending the current administration's term for an additional 2 years. But a week later, the UN Security Council rejected the extension of the president's term. The UNSC endorsed the African Union to mediate the electoral impasse. Tensions, sparked by the delay of the February elections, exploded as rival sides exchanged gunfire in the capital. But as government and opposition troops fortified their positions around Mogadishu,
the level of intercommunal violence remains high. CGTN's Patrick Oyet now reports.
South Sudan's defense ministry says it is hopeful that an arms embargo could be lifted next month. The ministry says the United Nations Security Council wants unified forces currently in training camps graduated and redeployed. The UN also wants child soldiers demobilized and recruitment of forces by all parties in South Sudan halted. It also wants the country's army to be under one command. Currently, there are various armed groups which have been put together in training camps, but they are loyal to their leaders and commanders and do not take orders from South Sudan's president. South Sudan's defense ministry says it is working to meet the demands of the United Nations Security Council.
It is important that we address those issues holistically and not individually, so that, you know, we can create that professional armed force, that professional police, that professional security agent. So it is a real challenge, the issue of the logistics, but the only way to address it is really to speedily graduate these forces.
The defense ministry says the soldiers in the training camps will graduate before the end of May and then be redeployed. The government says the delay in redeploying the soldiers is due to the lack of required funds for the payment of salaries, provision of food and uniforms for the troops. The UN Security Council is expected to review the arms embargo on South Sudan on May 31st. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Now, funerals have begun in Israel for some of the victims from Friday's massive stampede. The death toll stands at 45 from the tragedy at a Jewish festival in Mount Meron. More than 100 others are hurt. Officials are blaming overcrowding and a failure to heed safety warnings. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised an investigation into one of the nation's worst disasters. Stephanie Fried reports from the scene.
What began as a festive pilgrimage ended in one of Israel's biggest peacetime catastrophes. Overnight Thursday, worshippers pushing to exit a prayer session at a popular pilgrimage site stumbled and fell in a narrow corridor. Others fell on top of them, and a stampede ensued. Dozens were crushed to death. Throughout the next morning, rescue and medical teams worked to evacuate remaining pilgrims stranded at the site. Eyewitnesses tried to make sense of what they endured hours earlier.
It really was just a switch from music and togetherness to like literal panic.
And it was very confusing. It was like very chaotic. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know like where to go.
For hours, people were trying to find their loved ones and making sure everybody okay. And
each year, Mount Meron draws tens of thousands of Orthodox Jews to the gravesite of a second-century rabbi, where they pay homage and light bonfires to mark the Jewish Lag BaOmer holiday. Last year's festivities were canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. This year, health ministry officials recommended limiting numbers of participants to several thousand. According to some estimates, tens of thousands attended Thursday night's event. As the day progressed, the site of the tragedy remained open, and in almost surreal form, pilgrims continued flowing there to celebrate the holiday.
But here's what's coming up when we return. Uganda bans travelers from India as the Asian country reports a record number of new infections.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
we celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's now turn to the latest on the COVID-19 pandemic. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases globally has passed the 150 million mark. The World Health Organization says the world is seeing another wave of the virus. In February, the number of new daily cases globally had dropped to about 350,000. It's now over 820,000. The health agency blames a new variant and a failure to follow restrictions for the rise. India has recorded yet another spike in coronavirus cases. The country announced more than 400,000 new infections on Saturday. It comes as 18 people were killed in a hospital fire in the western state of Gujarat. The hospital was treating COVID-19 patients. Ravinda Bawa has more from Delhi.
There have been these instances of fire, and that is because a lot of time these hospitals are not equipped to cater to so many patients, and their electricity circuits are not so well maintained, and that's supposedly one of the reasons that the administration is citing in Gujarat, that could be short circuit, could be one of the reasons for this this fire break that happened last night, which also killed around 18 people. The government has announced 400,000 rupees compensation for each family. The rest of the patients, about 50 of them who were rescued by people and the fire brigade personnel, have been shifted to nearby hospitals, and these instances are happening on a regular basis all along, as I mentioned. As far as the cases are concerned, the surge is continuing, even if we look at Delhi, which is under about going to be 2-week lockdown, but still we have had above 27,000 cases in the last 24 hours. So there is no respite in terms of the cases, and there's no respite in terms of getting hospital beds or oxygen supply in hospitals, and people are still running from pillar to post to just get their patients admitted or get them the right kind of treatment. Today was the first day when the people who are above the age of 18 are allowed to be vaccinated. They have registered, over 10 million people have registered themselves to get vaccinated. The vaccination program was supposed to start today, the latest phase. But unfortunately, yesterday we heard from a number of states across the country saying that they do not have enough doses to start this vaccination program for people above the age of 18. While for the people above the age of 45, the central government is sponsoring the jabs for them. That program is still continuing. But as far as the even Chief Minister of Delhi came out yesterday and appealed to the people above age of 18 not to come and queue outside these vaccination centers because there are no doses to be given to them.
Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has offered support to India over its coronavirus crisis. President Xi says China is willing to work with India to beat the pandemic. He says countries can only win the battle by uniting resources. More than 40 countries have committed to sending medical aid to India. China has sent some 26,000 oxygen concentrators and ventilators and nearly 3,800 tons of medicines and medical materials last month. More will be delivered in May. In a phone conversation with the Indian External Affairs Minister, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China will speed up its production and delivery of medical supplies to India. China will also organize special video conference calls for medics to share their experiences and expertise. Minister Subramanyam Jaishankar has thanked China for its goodwill and support. Uganda has banned travelers from India as part of new measures to contain the deadly COVID-19 strain. The restrictions come hours after the Ministry of Health confirmed that Uganda has registered the COVID-19 variant discovered in India. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Ugandan scientists say they've so far detected 5 variants from different countries, and one of them is a highly infectious super spreader variant discovered in India. Health workers are now moving to contain the disease.
All passenger flights
between Uganda and India are suspended until further notice.
The Indian Association of Uganda is rallying its members to follow the stipulated health guidelines. Ugandan scientists say so far one person has tested positive with the variant that was discovered in India. He is currently undergoing care. They are now advising the public to be cautious and suspend all non-essential travel to countries with high infections. Apart from India, travelers from the US, the UK, Turkey, South Africa and Nigeria, among others, have also been advised to suspend non-essential travel to Uganda. The World Health Organization is now encouraging locals to embrace vaccination.
When you get vaccinated, you ensure that your health systems does not collapse, your economy can be opened, and you prevent mutation.
Uganda has so far registered over 40,000 cases and more than 300 deaths. Scientists are hopeful that the new restrictions could help contain the spread of the deadly disease. Ilara Yesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
On to North Africa now, where Egypt's drug authority says it has granted emergency approval for China's Sinovac vaccine. The country has so far received shipments of the other Chinese vaccine by Sinopharm, as well as AstraZeneca jabs. Egypt says it is preparing to produce up to 80 million doses of the Sinovac vaccine locally. Here is Adel Mahroui with more.
The Egyptian Drug Authority green-lighted a new COVID-19 vaccine. On Monday, Sinovac's CoronaVac became the second Chinese vaccine to get approval for emergency usage.
When the drug authority approves a vaccine, it follows a set of internationally agreed upon regulation. Approving Sinovac's vaccine means that it verified the components. It reviewed available research and stability studies. It got samples to analyze them and finalize that it's safe.
Egypt so far only administers AstraZeneca and Sinopharm's COVID-19 vaccines. Allocating jabs has been very challenging for the North African nation. Less than 1% of the population got vaccinated so far after 3 months of rolling out the vaccines.
Approving a new vaccine in Egypt is a good step to fill the horrific gap in COVID-19 vaccines. The West is monopolizing the vaccines. Egypt will need to diversify its sources so it can vaccinate 60 to 70% of its population in a short time. We need speed. If we live longer with the virus, it will mutate like in India and it will get out of hand.
Egyptian experts say they're pleased to see that vaccine cooperation with China is expanding.
There has been serious side effects in other vaccines. It is rare, 4 out of 1 million. The experience with the Chinese vaccine, on the other hand, didn't so far prove any serious side effects, just the usual slight fever or fatigue. It goes away in a couple of days. So there is more comfort towards using the Chinese vaccine.
China's cooperation with Egypt will avail COVID-19 vaccines to a great extent. This cooperation is very fruitful because we are moving into manufacturing the vaccines to break the shortage in supply.
Sinovac's CoronaVac is the 5th approved COVID-19 vaccine in Egypt. For citizens waiting in Egypt's massive line to get the jab, it's a relief to learn that more vaccines will be available soon.
Of course, it is good that we are expanding the list of vaccines available for people. Those who took the Chinese vaccines did not talk about any side effects. I'm not sure if that is related to effectiveness of the vaccine. What I know is that, so far, no one who took the Chinese vaccine has complained about it.
So far, Egypt received nearly 2 million vaccines. It's expecting 500,000 more doses by the end of the week. Sinovac's COVID-19 vaccine is also going to be the first COVID-19 vaccines to be produced locally. Egypt production lines could produce up to 80 million doses annually. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Ras Sadr, Egypt.
The United Nations World Food Programme says it's facing a funding shortfall of $86 million to feed about 1.2 million refugees in Uganda. The food agency warns it may be forced to slash food rations for a third time in less than a year. Isabel Nakiria now reports.
It's a lifeline for more than 1 million refugees, but there are stark warnings about the future of this food program. A funding shortfall for the next 6 months comes at a time when the region is facing a widespread hunger. The UN has warned more cuts are imminent if the money doesn't come through.
But at the moment, we are at a 40% cut. We cut in April 30% 2020, and then this year we've done an additional 10%. We're hoping that this will be sustained throughout the rest of the year without further additional cuts, but depending on the funding situation, this might change.
Concerns are growing over the nutrition needs of refugees. Studies done by the World Food Programme show that 45% of refugee households are not getting the healthy food they need. South Korea has already delivered 4,500 metric tons of rice, and a grant of $9.8 million has come from Japan. But that's not enough.
At the end of the day, food is what we need, and we cannot deliver food without strong partnerships. And so as we strive to strengthen the delivery of food to the most vulnerable, particularly women and children in the refugee and host community, we hope that we will be able to bridge the gap that has been caused also by the COVID pandemic.
Uganda hosts about 1.4 million refugees, but with instability in the region, it's thought more could make their way into the country. The disaster ministry warns this is putting a strain on the country's resources, and concerns about adequate food are growing daily. Isabel Nakiria, CGTN, Kampala.
Now, many asylum seekers in Libya suffer human rights abuses during their time in detention centers. However, their hopes for a better future are now being renewed through Rwanda's emergency transit mechanism. Displaced persons can now find safety at a facility in Gashora after being evacuated from Libya.
When Hadia was born, her parents were in a detention center in Libya. The family was evacuated to Rwanda's emergency transit facility in Gashora when she was 2 months old. Hadia's family were among the first group of asylum seekers evacuated in 2019.
As a father, I am responsible for my family. I never gave up hope, even when my situation seemed bleak. There is nothing to look forward to in my country, so we have no choice.
Some refugees are processed for integration into Rwandan society or resettled elsewhere. They are also given the option of returning to countries where they were previously granted asylum. If they choose to, and if it is safe to do so, they can also return home. In the meantime, refugees can live and work amongst their host communities.
We had heard about this country and that it was secure and not like Libya. When most people go to Libya, they are worried about being in detention and whether or not they will have freedom.
During a 3-day visit to Rwanda, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, visited the Gashora facility.
I spoke to a family from Somalia. Many of them have harrowing stories of abuse, of torture even, of long detention, of uncertainty, of despair. And this is a time when they can also try to overcome some of that trauma.
The emergency transit mechanism in Rwanda is an agreement between the government, the UN Refugee Agency, and the African Union. The mechanism targets refugees most at risk in Libya. Since the first evacuation, more than 500 refugees and asylum seekers have been moved to the transit center. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, it's just about time for the business. Here's what's coming up on Africa Live Base. Zimbabwe launches a land bank to finance resettled farmers.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours,
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start the business off in Zimbabwe, where a land bank aiming to offer more financing to resettled farmers has been launched. The Agriculture Finance Corporation will assist in agricultural insurance and leasing to farmers. From Harare, here is CGTN's Mahia Mutua with more details.
Zimbabwe has restructured Agribank, a commercial bank, into a diversified agricultural finance institution to provide crucial yet sparse finance to farmers so they can enhance their productive capacity. Thousands of farmers resettled during the country's land reform program have decried the lack of adequate finance to scale up their operations, resulting in low productivity and underutilization of farms.
This is an integral part of our agriculture and food systems transformation strategy. Inclusive, sustainable agricultural financing and development are among the key success factors for a transformative agricultural sector. The agriculture and food systems transformation strategy will transform agriculture from a US $5.3 billion industry to a US $8.2 billion industry by 2025, with exports exceeding $4.5 billion by that year.
The Land Bank incorporates a commercial bank, leasing arm, and an agricultural insurance division to mitigate the risk factors that have plagued farming in recent years due to erratic weather. Unlike existing commercial institutions, the Finance Corporation will not necessarily insist on collateral security, but advance some loans on the strength of business projects. The provision of appropriate finance is crucial to helping small-scale and communal farmers make the transition from seasonal and subsistence farming to more commercially viable agriculture. 700 million Zimbabwe dollars, about $8.3 million US, has been allocated as initial capital.
A strong balance sheet for the Land Bank, Your Excellency, is critical in order to enable it to undertake its mission of underpinning agricultural recovery and growth. And to this end, government is exploring various strategies to strengthen the Land Bank's balance sheet, including the transfer of unencumbered state land to the Land Bank.
Zimbabwe's agriculture sector is set to rebound on the back of a good rainy season that's seen a surge in production across major crops, including maize, whose harvest rose from 907 million metric tons in 2020 to a projected 2.7 million this year, and tobacco, whose deliveries are forecast to rise to 200 million kilograms from 135 million last year. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Egypt has launched the second phase of the economic reform program that it started in 2016. The new stage is aimed at creating jobs, attracting investments, and targets growth rates of over 7% by the fiscal year 2025-2026. CGTN's Yasser Hakim reports.
The Egyptian government calls it a program of structural reforms to capitalize on the previous successful IMF-backed economic measures. It will target sustainable growth, make up for the losses incurred by the COVID-19 pandemic, and achieve ambitious growth rates of 7% in 3 years.
Achieving 7% growth rate is based on several indicators, such as the success in containing the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. The government is increasing public investments in different sectors, in housing, infrastructure, agriculture, in manufacturing by building industrial cities, while concentrating on IT technology and exports of goods and commodities to increase hard currency inflows and raise foreign currency reserves.
Influenced by the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, one sector that will see the most growth is healthcare. Public investments will increase by a considerable 205%, opening 23 new hospitals, increasing the capacity of current hospitals, raising the number of intensive care unit beds by 55%, and incubators by 10%. Improving the climate for private sector investments is also on the agenda. But a main priority as well is reducing public debt that has risen sharply to cover the anti-COVID-19 expenses.
The government has been reducing the budget deficit by transforming borrowing policies to long-term, low-interest rate debts. The target is to stabilize the debt levels in the first year and cutting on borrowing in the second and third years of the program.
The last 5 years have seen tough austerity measures and a pandemic that has taken a huge toll on Egyptians. The North African state's prime minister has promised no new burdens on citizens going forward.
There is special emphasis on social safety programs like Takaful, Karama and Dignified Life to improve the lives of 58 million Egyptians by developing 4,658 villages and 175 municipalities. Work has already started on this. There will be raises in salaries and pensions and improving labor skills through vocational training. The plan is aimed at increasing production. This will strengthen the Egyptian pound, which will reflect on the personal incomes and therefore provide a dignified life to the people.
Implementation of the second phase of the economic program is expected to begin in the new fiscal year from the 1st of July. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, more than 1,200 employees stand to lose their jobs at SAA Technical. That's a subsidiary of South African Airways. The state-owned airline has been in business rescue since December 2019. CGTN's Angelo Coppola picks up the story.
The retrenchment notices were issued by SAA Technical Management on 29 April. The notice was expected.
It comes as no surprise, to be honest. 70% of SA Technical's income is generated from SA Airways. So with SA Airways that's not working, 70% is obviously eroded, and the rest of the finances are generated via Mango and Come. Come being in business rescue, and we know what the issues are at Mango.
One of the key reasons for the start of the retrenchment process is that SAA remains in business rescue, and this is a major concern for another union.
We believed as NUMSA that they were making a fundamental mistake by not incorporating and including the subsidiaries in the business rescue process. They didn't do that. And now the subsidiaries are all in distress.
The country's labour laws give management and labour officials 60 days from the first notice to finalise the matter. It coincides with the estimated delivery date of emergency government funding.
The monies that is requested is detailed within the appropriation bill that's currently before Parliament, but Parliament is currently in recess. So we don't have any answers to that as yet. But the point is, even if there's appropriation, one can just look at what is the company or the airlines currently standing still. It's SAA, Mango has issues, and now SA Technical. It just shows that the constant reliance on taxpayers are not working.
Others hold out some hope that the funding will arrive in time.
I think when we meet with the management of SAA Technical under the auspices of the CCMA, hopefully we will be able to engage each other, and that funding, if it is made available and is due to be made available in time, that might be able to mitigate against what SAA Technical has basically said, what they're proposing with the Section 189.
SAA Technical had little chance of making it through the pandemic, considering that 3 of its biggest clients were either in business rescue or about to enter the process, which now means that around 1,000 people are going to be jobless from the end of June.
I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Still in South Africa, beef producers reckon the country has tremendous opportunity to grow its beef exports. Farmers and producers are keen to grab a share of this market. CGTN Sumitra Naidu tells us more.
South African cattle farmers have developed a reputation for the quality of beef they produce. The beef industry prefers to keep volumes smaller and pays attention to specific cuts.
We've got 41% of our local industries in the hands of the emerging sector. And what we're saying is if we get the buy-in from the emerging sector and get their animals also within this value chain, or there's already a lot of them to with regards to, or specifically in the manner that we feed our animals. So there are other specific requirements that we might not be able to adhere to, but there are other countries that don't worry about these requirements and we can export to them, and we need to optimize and use the opportunities that we have to those countries.
Disease also creates a limitation.
The one challenge that stands out is traceability, of course. So the European Union as a market focuses a lot, understandably so, on traceability of products. Where do the products come from? Can you trace it, what they call from the farm to the fork, and things like that. And South Africa still has some work to do in that regard to satisfy those markets by looking internally at taking our production and traceability to the desired level where we really can satisfy those markets.
The beef industry is the second fastest growing commodity in the agricultural sector of South Africa. With the government's focus firmly on growing agriculture, meat exports overall will benefit. Currently, Brazil and Argentina lead global exports, but local farmers will argue that the quality is far from what is found in South Africa. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigeria's electricity woes have worsened after the recent failure of some of its power generating plants. The country is ranked second behind India among nations with large populations that have limited access to electricity. CGTN's Phil Ihaza tells us how business owners across the country are facing hard times as a result of the chronic power outage.
Esther Mike has been running this salon for 3 years. She says due to poor electricity supply, she has not been able to make much profit.
Most of what we do here depends solely on electricity. We blow dry, we wash, even down to like treating of hairs. We use electricity to do it. And then most of the time, like 80% of the time, we have to rely on generators. And then, of course, the fuel prices, like the whole thing has hiked, and we are barely making profit, really.
The World Bank reports that businesses and households across the country lose up to $29 billion annually as a result of power failure in Nigeria. The Ministry of Power says 16 out of 28 power generating plants have either suffered a breakdown, are experiencing gas shortage, or are undergoing maintenance. It's happening at a time when Nigeria's economy is just recovering from recession and businesses are still struggling to cope from months of shutdown last year due to COVID-19.
In the energy mix of Nigeria, about 82% of our generating stations depend on gas. So when there's a shortage of gas or an outage of gas, the power generation falls. And we also have even the maintenance culture problem. We have a backlog of broken down turbines that have not been fixed. We have no service maintenance contracts not being honored. We have the preventive maintenance not being executed until there's a breakdown. Then we now go into corrective maintenance.
For years, despite investments in power, Nigeria has only distributed an average of 4,000 megawatts for its over 200 million population, far from a required 200,000 megawatts, according to the Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors. Experts say beyond funding, the country's power grid is obsolete and needs to be decentralized from being mainly based in the south.
Why do they have to generate in the south and all the way to the core north? We have the different energy mix within the area. Look at the northern area, what works for them. It even put a less toll on the transmission network because you don't have to generate an all. There are losses along the line. There are lots of losses along the line. Then there is the cost of manpower to maintain the network.
The Ministry of Power has promised to rectify the problems and restore better electricity supply soon.
The government says it's in partnership with the World Bank, German firm Siemens and other private bodies to develop other sources of energy like solar to meet its goal of transmitting and distributing 25,000 megawatts of electricity by 2025.
And if that goal is met, entrepreneurs like Esther can make more profits and the country could in turn generate better revenue for its currently fragile economy. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
And here's what's coming up in the sport. We profile South Africa's leading female boxing promoter Joyce Kungwane, who's breaking barriers in the sport.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.